This month's episodes celebrate 200 years of the Erie Canal. These installments are a personal convergence with the Virgin Mary and my growing in understanding of her presence wherever I traveled. First, a book update. As you know, NicoSteves.com is the best way to keep updated as to what's what, plus the exclusive way to get onto my mailing list. And there's a link posted there at NicoSteves.com that goes to the YouTube channel. Currently, on the YouTube channel is a video where I read from my book, The Very Fine Light, plus these podcasts are now populating the channel as well. Nico Steves here. I'm sharing an intersection of my first original work and how it impacted my getting closer to the Virgin Mary over this month's podcasts. Why, you may ask? Because this month is the commemoration of the bicentennial of the Erie Canal, which is a 350-mile artificial waterway that crosses New York State and helped turn New York City into the center of the New World. Now, back 25 years ago, I made an independent movie called The Origins of the Erie Canal, which I recently added a 25-year later section. You'll be hearing the soundtrack of this 45-minute story broken up into 4 12-minute podcasts, and you'll be hearing them here for free. As for the convergence I mentioned with respect to the Virgin Mary, while shooting this work, I traveled from Atlanta to record the documentary and extensively traveled across New York State about a week here, a week there, over a 5-year period. Well, I would be meeting people named Mary, Marie, Marion, and what I began to appreciate when going to these new places and not really knowing anybody was just how the Virgin Mary is truly everywhere to be found. I'd see her name on churches, hospitals, schools, town streets, shrines, basilicas, cemeteries, and I felt at home. I was with a friend. Really, this is a tribute to Mother Mary and my growing in understanding of her presence wherever I traveled. It started during this documentary journey in parts of New York State unknown to me. She was always there. And I became more sensitive to the real nature of her being everywhere. And I've continued to find her as I leave the country too. And so I hope you enjoy, in 4 parts, the history of the Erie Canal that's been open for 200 years, right here on Constant Procession. And now enjoy installment 2.
Those early proponents of a canal journeyed to Washington, D.C. to plead with President Thomas Jefferson. Their meeting was unsuccessful. The harder the canal commissioners sought a solution, the more bleak the outlook became. Someone had to step up in a leadership position, and that man was DeWitt Clinton. As mayor of New York City, Clinton was an innovator. His contributions to the city were ahead of their times. His ability to develop and implement ideas have marked the landscape of both the city and the country. He was to become immortalized for his work on the Erie Canal.
England and Canada controlled the Great Lakes at that time. And Clinton, in his wisdom, said, if we're going to save that whole center core of our country from going over to Canada, we better get some way to handle that product. And that was one of the main reasons for proposing this system.
The men finally realized they would have to convince the citizens of the state of New York of the plan's merits and justify the plan to them. As Clinton and the other canal commissioners crossed the state on a final survey trip, they took great care to note any industry that would be able to contribute toward repayment of the canal debt by paying tolls to use the canal. While on this trip, DeWitt Clinton wrote, "Salina has a great salt industry. The canal path would benefit if this area was on the route."
And that's when DeWitt Clinton, who was a latecomer to the idea, because we don't call it Hawley's Ditch, do we? It's Clinton's Ditch. And he became convinced on this trip, not only is it possible, this could be a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Clinton and his supporters won popular support for the canal, and the people elected him to be their new governor, empowering Clinton to build this great ditch. And after much debate, the canal law was passed. Save for one final hurdle, a chance to veto the whole project.
As luck would have it, the veto power at the time did not reside in the governor, but resided in a committee of 5. And there were 2 people for it, and there were 2 people against it. And one person hung in the balance, and that was the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, Chancellor James Kent. Now, the story goes he had made his feelings known earlier. He sympathized with Thomas Jefferson. It wasn't that he hated DeWitt Clinton, although many people did, that he was against it. He had an honest conviction this would bankrupt the entire state, and we would just go under. He was about ready to vote against the measure, went into the debate. The Council of Revision, it was called. Comes the Vice President of the United States and former Governor of New York, Daniel Tompkins. And Daniel Tompkins comes in and he says, "Now, gentlemen, please, you must understand that we have just finished a war with England. You people are discussing a bill that is going to result in spending perhaps $5 million to build a canal, when we need arms and we need equipment and we need cannon. We need all kinds of things because we are going to be at war with England." And Chancellor Kent turned to him and he said, "Sir, are you quite sure?" And Tompkins was supposed to have said, "I am definitely sure. I can promise you, sir, England will never forgive us our victories. We will be at war with England in a matter of a year, perhaps 2. With that, Kent pounded his fist on the table. He rose and he stared the Vice President in the eye. And he said, "If we must have a canal or a war, I vote for the canal." And so it was passed.
The art of civil engineering didn't exist here, so the people turned to the brightest and most trusted citizens they knew, lawyers. 2 of the earliest novice lawyers turned engineers who were charged with building the ditch were Benjamin Wright and James Geddes.
They wanted to see how much they could get accomplished in 2 years. Therefore, they started not at Buffalo or at Lockport, so they began at Rome, New York, digging east and west.
The canal was built through mile upon mile of wilderness that was sparsely populated with settlers in a time and place where roads were non-existent, and energy for clearing trees and moving boulders consisted of physical manpower and the brute strength of the horse. This was a time when fire was a high-tech tool.
Because there was no school of engineering, no professors you could go to. They did it by being very intelligent men who worked very hard and who took a chance.
We are digging a ditch through the mire, the muck and the mud. By heck! And the mud is our principal hire. In our pants, up our sleeves, down our neck. By heck!
Sometimes this artificial river would have to climb high cliffs and cross over deep valleys. So they used locks for climbing and aqueducts for crossing these obstacles. Locks could be filled with water to let a boat step over the cliffs. Aqueducts were bathtub-like structures that were strong enough to support the weight of the canal bed itself as it crossed a valley. Locks and aqueducts kept the water level all along the way.
If they had started the Erie Canal in the western end, they would never have finished it, simply because they had to blast their way through rock in western New York.
Oh, and they used high-tech tools of the day, too. They used scrapers, mostly. You know, sort of like a popcorn scoop you might dig popcorn out of, you know. This thing had 2 handles on the end, so it was a box. It had 3 sides on it. You could tie a rope to the box, lift up the handle, and a team of animals would move along, and the blade would kind of dig into the earth. And the box would fill, then you would tip it back, and then go up and dump this box. Then you'd come around, and there were teams of scrapers that went across. Sometimes they call them the slip scraper. And they developed a new kind of plow to dig through the roots, because this was in wilderness, you know. A new type of wheelbarrow they had to design. They even invented a device to pull trees down. They would tie a rope to a winch, and they would turn the crank, and there was like a worm gear or an auger, and it was such that the tree would bend and bend and bend, and it would snap it right off at the base. But then you had the stump. Oh, now you had to dig it out, you had to burn it out. So they came up with a stump puller. Huge device, wheels maybe 14 feet in diameter, with an axle that was free to spin when the big wheels were blocked. Then on that axle there was a wheel of maybe, say, 8 feet or 6 feet in diameter, and around that middle wheel that was attached by a rope to a team of animals. So when that middle wheel turned, the axle spun, and the stump would go. And so away they went. Stump pulling, another daunting task, was getting the canal, as one is heading towards Buffalo, up the face of the Niagara Escarpment, this cliff.
Another of the forgotten canal builders, Nathan Roberts, considered the acceptance of his proposed solution to this Niagara Escarpment challenge as the most important event in his life.
Nathan Roberts was the great canal engineer. He had no canal experience, and he had no civil engineering degree. They learned by doing.
That's it for this special about the Erie Canal. Please come back next week for more. This is Nico Steves. I hope you enjoyed this installment. My book, The Very Fine Light, can be found using the title The Very Fine Light on Amazon.com. Please feel free to contact me at nicosteves.com. That's Nikos Steves, Steves.com. If you like this episode, and for more, share them with friends. This is Nico Steves. Thank you. See you next time.